Hello everyone, I am Dr. Manoj Das. I am orthopedic surgeon. Today we will be discussing fracture healing. Fracture healing is a regenerative process which aims at restoring the damaged bone to its pre-injury state and to its pre-injury cellular composition. Now, in the first few slides, we will be describing the basic science related to the fracture healing, so that it becomes easy to understand the different stages of the fracture healing. We all know the bone is composed of the mineral and organic matter. 70% of the bone is composed of mineral, which is the hydroxyapatite, calcium hydroxyapatite. Second thing, regarding the organic matter, consists the 30% of the bone. Among the organic matter, type 1 collagen is the main constituent present in the bone. Regarding the cells constitute only 2% of the organic matter of the bone. The cells which are important for the fracture healing are the osteoblast, osteocyte, osteoclast and mesenchymal stem cells. Now we will describe what are the important cells and what are their functions in the fracture healing. First is the osteoblast. So osteoblast secretes the type 1 collagen. It acts as a scaffold on which the mineral component crystalline hydroxyapatite is deposited. The second cell is the chondrocyte. In the mature bone, well formed bone, we do not have the chondrocyte, but chondrocyte or chondroblast is present in the certain stage of the fracture healing, and then it undergoes the apoptosis. So what is the role of the chondroblast or chondrocyte? It secretes the type 2 collagen, which is the initial extracellular fibrocartilaginous matrix. The osteoclast helps in the reabsorption of the bone and helps in the remodeling of bone. Now another important cell is the mesenchymal stem cells. Now this can differentiate into the different cells like osteoblast, chondroblast and fibroblast. Now what is the source of the mesenchymal stem cells? Mesenchymal stem cells can arise from the periosteum, endosteum and the medullary cavity. Among these, the most important source is the periosteum. It has got the committed osteoprogenitor cells and uncommitted, undifferentiated mesenchymal cells. And similarly, another source is the endosteum. Endosteum is a single cell layer of osteoblast and quiescent osteoblast lineage cells that can be activated following injury and have direct access to hematoma. Third source is the medullary cavity. Among these, I again repeat, periosteum is the most important source of the mesenchymal stem cells, which can differentiate into osteoblast, chondroblast as well as the fibroblast. Now what are the growth factors involved in the fracture healing? So there are so many growth factors involved in the fracture healing. Important ones are the vascular endothelial growth factor, transforming growth factor beta, platelet derived growth factors, fibroblast growth factors and the bone morphogenetic protein. So they have the osteogenic or angiogenic effect, or they have the both effect. Among these, the most important is the vascular endothelial growth factor, because this is the central mediator for other growth factors. Now it has the both osteogenic and angiogenic effect. It acts as the chemoattractant for the osteoblast, mesenchymal stem cell and endothelial cells. Similarly, transforming growth factor beta and platelet derived growth factor has also got the osteogenic and angiogenic effect. They both act as the chemoattractant for the osteoblasts. Now fibroblast growth factor has got the angiogenic effect. It acts as the mitogenic factors for the endothelial cells. Another growth factor which is very important for the healing is the bone morphogenetic factor, especially 2, 4 and 7. It has got the osteogenic property, helps in the differentiation of the osteoblast like cells. Now in summary, you can say that the different growth factors helps in the differentiation and formation of osteoblast, fibroblast, chondroblast and the new blood vessels. These are important for the fracture healing. Now another term which frequently comes during the fracture healing is the scaffold. So what is the scaffold? Now the literal meaning of a scaffold is it is a temporary structure used to support the workers and materials to aid in the construction, maintenance and repair of building. So in the picture we can see this is the scaffold for this structure. So there are different scaffold or supporting structure in the different stages of the fracture healing, which provides the structural support as well as it has got the regulatory function. So in the initial stage, hematoma act as the supporting structure for the inflammatory cells. Later on, the scaffold is the fibrocartilaginous structure, especially the type 2 collagen secreted by the chondroblast, and in the later stage the type 1 collagen secreted by the osteoblast acts as the osteoblast. So this is the important for the different cells to act and secrete the different cytokines and growth factors. Now we move to the fracture healing. So what is the prerequisite for the fracture healing? Now the two prerequisite for the fracture healing is the adequate blood supply and adequate mechanical stability. Without these two factors, the fracture will not unite and go into the non-union. Now what are the types of bone healing? So one is the direct or primary bone healing and second is the indirect or secondary bone healing. So what is the indirect fracture healing? So when the fracture healed by the callus formation, we call it a indirect fracture healing. So we can see in the picture there is the lots of callus. Callus is a new bone. So again you can see that there is the callus or new bone. Again in the second picture also we can see there is the callus formation or the new bone formation. So here the fracture has united by the indirect method or healing by the callus formation. Another is the direct fracture healing. So what is direct fracture healing? So when the fracture healed by the no callus formation, we call it a direct fracture healing. In the picture we can see the fracture has already united, but we do not see any callus formation. So here we can say there the bone has united by direct fracture healing. So when does the indirect fracture healing occurs? So when we treat the fracture such that there is micro motion at the fracture site. In other way we can say when the strain at the fracture site is 2 to 10%, then there will be the indirect fracture healing or healing by the callus formation. So what are the treatment method? So when we treat the fracture by non-operative means like slab, cast, splint, so there will be the indirect fracture healing or healing by the callus formation. Similarly, if we treat the fracture by the external fixator, when we treat the fracture by the intramedullary interlocking nail, or when we treat the fracture by the K-wire and plating. So plating done in the mode other than the compression mode. So if we treat the fracture in these ways, then there will be healing of the fracture by the callus formation. So when does the direct fracture healing occurs? So treatment is such that there is no micro motion at the fracture site, or when the strain at the fracture site is the less than 2%, then there will be no healing by no callus formation. So what are the conditions? One is the treatment by the tension band wiring, another is the treatment by the lag screw technique, and third is the plating in the compression mode. So when we treat the fracture by plating in the compression mode, then there will be healing by the direct means or without callus formation. But when we treat the fracture by the plating but not in the compression mode as seen in here, then it will be healed by the indirect fracture method, indirect fracture healing method. Now we'll describe the stages of indirect fracture healing, stages of the, what are the stages of the callus formation. Now in the general terms, whenever there is the injury to the tissue, any tissue in the bone, how does the, whenever there is injury to the body, so how does our tissue is repaired, or how does the body react to it? So initially our body reacts to any injury by the inflammation, and then there will be healing or repair process, and there will be remodeling of the tissue. So this is the basic mechanism of healing of any tissue when that tissue is injured. So same thing applies to the bone also. When there is the fracture of the bone, so there will be inflammation, then there will be healing process, and then there will be a remodeling process. So this process is only extended to different stages of the fracture healing. So we'll see that. So what are the proper stages of the indirect fracture healing? First is the stage of fracture hematoma formation. Second is the stage of inflammation. Third is stage of soft callus formation. Fourth is the stage of hard callus formation, and fifth is the stage of remodeling. So we'll discuss each stage in a detailed way. First is the stage of hematoma formation. So fracture hematoma arises from disruption of the local tissue. It contains, the hematoma contains the platelet, erythrocyte and immune cells. There are also adequate number of mesenchymal stem cells are recruited. Now the important thing about the fracture hematoma is that fracture hematoma is a bioactive. Now the fracture hematoma is different from the peripheral blood. It is said that fracture hematoma is bioactive. So what does that mean? So when the different experiment has shown that when we take the fracture hematoma and keep at the other side behind the periosteum or behind the muscles, so there will be ectopic bone formation, but that does not occur with the peripheral blood. So fracture hematoma is a bioactive. It can give rise to the ectopic bone formation. So this is the importance of the fracture hematoma. Now second stage is the stage of inflammation. So there are different cellular debris present at the fracture hematoma which initiate the inflammation. Then it is mediated by the local and inflammatory cells. There are different inflammatory cells present already in the hematoma, and there also be the different interleukins will be, cytokines will be secreted by the cells which cause the recruitment of the more inflammatory cells. So what is the role of that inflammatory cells? It causes the phagocytosis of the necrotic tissue, and it also produces the different cytokines that influence the healing. Now suppose this is the fracture. So this is the medullary cavity, this is the cortex, and this is the periosteum. So what happens during the fracture? When there is the fracture, there will be the hematoma formation, and there will be the migration of the different inflammatory cells, and those inflammatory cells will secrete the different cytokines and different growth factors which we already discussed. So that growth factors will have the different roles in the recruitment of the different cells as well as the differentiation of the mesenchymal stem cells. Now third stage is the stage of soft callus formation. So here the mesenchymal stem cells undergoes the differentiation, and it provides the chondrogenic cells and osteogenic cells, and these chondrogenic cells and osteogenic cells secrete the collagen. chondrogenic cells will secrete the type 2 collagen and bone will secrete the type 1 collagen. So these collagens provide the some sort of mechanical stability, and these collagens ultimately replace the hematoma and fibrous tissue. So in this picture we can see there is the stage of hematoma and inflammatory phase, and then there will be decrease of inflammatory cells, there will be the migration or differentiation of the osteoblast and chondroblast, and this osteoblast chondroblast will secrete the collagen which forms the soft callus. So soft callus means the bone is surrounded by the fibrocartilaginous structure which is known as the soft callus. So still it is not mineralized, it is known as the soft callus. Now the fourth stage is the stage of hard callus. So already there is the soft callus, and there will be at the stage of the hard callus there will be deposition of the calcium in the cartilage matrix. After deposition of the calcium, those chondrocytes will hypertrophy, and then it senescence, and there will also be the invasion of blood vessel in the callus. So once there is the invasion of the blood vessel and deposition of the calcium, this hypertrophied and senescent cartilage cells undergo the apoptosis and die. So there will be once there is the deposition of the cartilage, and once there is this deposition of the calcium in the extracellular matrix, there will be the formation of oven bone which is known as the hard callus. So at this stage we will be able to see the calcification and consolidation, new bone formation in the X-ray. So as in this picture you can see there is the new bone formation. So at the stage of hard callus only we will be able to appreciate the healing process in the radiograph. Now this is the stage of soft callus which has got the fibrocartilaginous structure. So when there is the deposition of cartilage and new blood vessel invasion, there will be apoptosis of cartilage cells, and then after the mineralization soft callus turns into the hard callus. So by the end of this stage there will be formation of oven bone. Oven bone means the bone which is irregular, haphazard, it will not be a lamellar bone. Now the fifth stage is the stage of remodeling. So at this stage the bone healing, it is a phase of bone healing that returns the previously damaged tissue nearer to its pre-injured state, and the canalicular architecture of bone is re-established and the Haversian system with its osteocyte is restored. Now it continues for months or years after a solid osseous union has been achieved. Now let's see in this picture. So we are by the end of the hard callus we have a oven bone. So it undergoes the remodeling and turns into lamellar bone. So what is the difference between the oven bone and lamellar bone? Here the bone will be irregular, so there will be no medullary cavity, no well formed cortex. But if you see compare the other picture, we will have the well formed medullary cavity, well formed cortex. Bone is arranged in the lamellar pattern. Now what is the timeline of the fracture healing? Means what is the duration of each stage of the fracture healing? So different stages of fracture does not occur separately, there is overlapping of the time period of the different stages. So initially there will be the hematoma as soon as the fracture occurs, and then there will be the inflammation. Inflammation starts within the 8 hours, and then it usually peaks to second and third day, and then it usually decreases by the 5th day. And another after that there will be the soft callus formation. Usually this starts around the 1 week, and then we can see that there is the peak soft callus formation around the 3rd weeks. Now hard callus formation usually start around the 3rd weeks, and this peaks around the 6th week. So by the 6th week we will be able to appreciate the fracture healing or hard callus formation in the X-ray. And then remodeling so continues for the years. So in this picture, this is the radiograph taken for at the different time period. So initially there is the fracture which you can be appreciated. Still at 1 week there is no any callus or any bone formation seen. At 1 month we can see a small amount of calcification and new bone formation here. And then at 6 weeks we can see there is the hard callus seen and healing of the fractures. But if we see at the 10 months, here there is the still a open bone, not well formed medullary cavity. But at 10 months after the remodeling we can see well formed medullary cavity, well formed cortex. So this is the stage of hard callus, and this is after the remodeling stage. So same thing can be seen in the children. So this is the very X-ray at the very young age, fracture at the very young age group. At the very young age group, the callus, even the callus appears at the 7th day. We can even at the 7th day we can appreciate the hard callus. So this only occurs when the child is very young. And after the remodeling you can see well formed medullary cavity and cortex. At the 2 weeks you can see this is the hard callus, which is the open bone, but here you can see the lamellar bone. So that's all for the today's discussion. In the next video we will be describing the direct fracture healing. Thank you.